All right. Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Check, check. Microphone check. One, two. Yes, indeed. Once again, this is Amuna Yisrael trying to get back in the groove of things. And this is the Lev Project Solonomic 101. We getting back in the groove now. Um, yeah. I hope everybody's having a blessed week. We just it's just starting. So whatever happened last week, you either learn from it, grow from it, or build on it. So it really depends. Oh, let me fix this here. Oh, there's that better. Hey, look, I'm all together this week. I even did up my head wrap. I'm ready. Woo! It's been wow. Just continue to keep us in your prayers. You know, yeah. So we was in the weeds. This is day reading number 6 for the voices of the female enslaved, what they left us on record in the early 1900s. If you don't know, we've been doing it for some time. Well, this is the female portion. We've been doing it since the beginning of the year. So let's say January 1. It's like going to be 3 full months that we have been reading this. Many hours of learning. And what we're also doing is taking a look at how our reading is faring with what we're watching. So right now we're watching Underground, comes on the television, WGN, I believe. But I just noticed that they're putting, if you don't have the television, then they're putting the episodes on the internet. So if you're watching this on the internet, I put the link in the box so that you can catch up if you've missed it. And basically what we're trying to do for edification and educational purposes is to be able to read into what it is that we're seeing so that we can line it up, because they said they read a lot of narratives. They had to have done a lot of research for this. And so we are fact checking. See, we're coming up out of the abstract thought of slavery. Oh, slavery is just so abstract. Everything is just all together. No, we're fact checking based on the things that we're learning, based on this is what we'll be reading tonight. This is Lewis Hughes. I even got the baby reading. She on break too. This is some of the compiled stories growing up. This is for younger ones, although it's not for really younger ones. Not too young, because then that's really traumatic. But the older ones, 10, 11, 12, thereabouts, they can, with some aid from their parents. And if some parents feel like it's too, like jumping straight into the narratives are too harsh, and then you can definitely read something like this, Growing Up in Slavery, Stories of Young Slaves as Told by Themselves. So they took some of the narratives out of, let's see, Frederick Douglass. They took some of the narratives out of Alado Equiano when he was a child, William Wells Brown when they was a child. So I might even read some of this here, because the children were exposed to harshness. They weren't shielded oftentimes because you was a child. You couldn't see it. I forgot who testified to seeing their mother literally stripped in front of them and whipped. And it's not to traumatize our children in this space and time, but it definitely is to bring or help them to understand and gain an awareness of the value of what it is they have right now. Like you have to instill. People say, oh, these children nowadays, they don't know. You have to put it there. They ain't gonna just be born with it. You have to put it there. You have to instill these values. You have to instill respect. You have to instill honor. You have to instill these things. They don't just come, with these things. And like I was saying, we read a narrative, and she said, these children are not like they used to be. But the days that she was referring to was slavery, where corporal punishment and capital punishment was the going, was the thing of the day. And so, not necessarily you're going to go around and doing these type of things to your child, but you do need to instill the things that you look. It's like you're planting these things. And for all those adult grandparents and elder parents out there, over and over, that's the stage I'm at right now, just over and over and over. It's like programming the human mind to say thank you, say please, these things. So when you see a child who's just rude, and that's the ego in full force. Like from 0 to 7, that's another thing. That's the ego, like full-fledged. And if you don't rein that child in and teach that child and rear that child, Some have different temperaments. Some are a little bit more turned up than others. But you, as the parent, the grandparents, the community, it is our responsibility to pull that child to the side and say, because they're going to do whatever they think they could get away with. And if it's not stopped in childhood, this is why we have off the chain adults. We have adults who throw temper tantrums. Why? Because this is the way I got away with it in childhood. So I'm going off into a different subject. I think it's because I just finally finished, and I just have one more thing to do on the Solonomics 101 book, which speaks about taking a look at all of these things. So I guess I'm in that mode. But let me switch back over here. And if that book will be coming out soon, so I definitely will let you know. And I'm thinking about doing a class. We'll see. Yeah. But we're going to read Miss Anna Crawford. Again, we're reading out of Weevils in the Wheat. Miss Anna Crawford says, I was born April 10th, 1863. My mother was a slave and belonged to Mrs. Margaret Waddell, who lived in Sycamore Street. This house still stands next door to Davis Southern College. And they said this is for female Europeans. Our master was good and kind to his slaves. We already established that in many, many other readings, what they're basing this on. Not the fact that they're a slave, but the fact of how they were treated while they were a slave. Neither one were cruel to us. My mother was a maid. Grandmother was colored. Mammy nurse of all the children. Sometimes, again, when you see nursing, they will put the slave master's children on your breast. But so all of this is going down into the psyche. I can't stress that enough. On West Street, Petersburg was the camping ground for both colored and white. Some of us colored children went to school in the camp houses after the war and had white teachers. One was named Mrs. Ellen Piermont, and Booth Ben, after all, decided to have free colored schools. I went to Jones Saint School, John's St. Andrew Smith Principal. That's a long name. It's what it says. So I'm like, am I reading it wrong? Been so long, I forget the stuff. School building had 4 rooms, 2 up and 2 down. She said, it's been so long. And that's what happened in school. You don't remember half that stuff they taught you. But that's another story. Truth will set you free. Been exactly what I know. No white folk didn't leave me nothing, but did wide world to make a living. So she's like, I guess the interviewer must have asked her, did they give you anything? We read some narratives where some people were bequeathed. One narrative we even read where they offered to send her to Liberia and she declined. It says, after war, mother took in washing and ironing, and my father was a cabinet maker on Washington Street. My mother died at childbirth, 1869. Doctor's wife died or sick same night, and he got to mother too late. The child lived and is now 69 years old, February the 3rd. So, you know, at this point, and even still today, childbirth is a serious issue. People seem to just go in it, you know, lightly and forget. Childbirth in some places around the world, yes, I know I watch crazy documentaries, but in places, certain places in certain villages in India, when they know that they've conceived and gonna go, they are very afraid. And also in Africa, where they have to walk, where some of the midwives are not closed and the clinics are not closed, and they have to walk far distances with a difficult childbirth. That's what it is. If the child, what today we know as breech, or you know, distended whatever, or you understand what I'm saying? All of these things that would present a difficult childbirth in antiquity, that meant infant mortality as well as mortality for the mother. So very serious issue. It says, my father, after the war, 1865, was past Master Mason of Knights of Pythias and had all the degrees. His name was Isaac C. Washington. And that's all she remembers. That is Mrs. Anna E. Crawford. And that name is funny, as I have a family name with that. Not from America, but then again, that's the name of the slave masters, Crawford. So let's go ahead over here and get another female. This is Women's History Month. And so although we're reading the narrative straight through, we're also, and the men had some very interesting things to say too now. So at another space and time, if you do get this book, definitely check out what the men are saying, because the men are dropping some knowledge. As you see, my book is all I done went through the whole book. This is not something I'm telling you to do that I didn't do. I'm kind of a stickler for that. You know, I've been through the book. It took me some time. Like I said, this is all my markings. This is all the stuff as I'm gathering the data. This is why it's funny for me when people say, no, it don't go like that. Okay, well, where can you substantiate that? Can you help me to understand where I can find this so that I can edify myself? It's not about arguing about information, but if we're not going to source our information, we were not there to this degree. And if we can't have an intelligent conversation, I mean, what is it all really about? Oh, sorry, let me see. I didn't, you know, what is it all really about? And so that's what, if anybody knows me, they'll be like, oh man, Amuna, because I'll be like, okay, can we source that? You know, because somebody's going to be coming behind you and they're going to want to edify themselves. And so in order to step away from rhetoric, and also in order to not just read 2 lines and conclude, this is another issue I have while I'm looking for the next female. I'm getting my bearings back, so maybe you're gonna get a little extra today. Rhetoric. And also in order to you're gonna get a little, just read 2 lines and conclude. This is another issue I have. Hold on. While I'm looking for wait a minute. It's okay. Okay, we have Angel on. I think our youth need to understand that we should be grateful for what we have in life and those who are in our lives. And we also need to teach our youth that then there is no shame to being the descendants of those Cain who were enslaved. We have to educate them, and it's our job. And this is, you know, hopefully, I agree, we can take this to the children, because adults, again, you know, oftentimes they'll fight with you. They don't want to do it. It's too much. But the children, age appropriate, of course, need to be educated. They need this information to be shared. Yes, sometimes we need to hold their hand and take them through it. And it's our responsibility. So we have to teach, we have to instill gratitude. We have to infuse it. Something that is reinforced every day. So definitely agreed. This is something that we can't sit back any longer and complain about, because it's very doable in whatever capacity. I'm not saying, boom, we are the world, you could change. No, in whatever capacity. This is a simple capacity. I put the babies, I say it's nap time. I give 30 minutes, I give an hour. I sit down, I read, I share with them, age appropriate. It's very doable for a house, a stay-at-home executive, whatever you want to call me. You know what I'm saying? It is very doable. What I feel that is lacking oftentimes is just the desire. It's the will. And once you have the will, like they say, where there's a will, there's a way. So once again, you know, when we're telling people to do things, it is most effective when we have first taken the time to do it ourselves, and when we have the right motivations behind why we're sharing. I'm sharing because I want to be able to have an intelligent conversation and for us to get somewhere. And it doesn't really work when only one person is educated. And so if it is time, or if it is desire, or if it is whatever it is, I say, you know what? I'm learning. I'm going to share what I'm learning so that we can hear. I had actually my Ima, who's been in on the project from the beginning. She said she was having a conversation, and the slave trade came up. And now she can feel more comfortable engaging in that conversation. She said, because of the Left Project, because she's learned so much in this almost 3 months. Myself included, I've learned so much that I don't, even though I'm working on names, because you hear me say, and what was the name of that person again? I'm working on names because sometimes names get swirled around in my head. But I can take you to the text. I can take you right back and say, yep, this is where it is, and this is where we read it, and this is who said it. As it relates to how we're going to deal one to another. So prayerfully, we raise the bar in this area, because we have the scholars and just those who consume everything the scholars say. And that median is where I want to get into that gap between those who just can pontificate all day and those who really need to get the information. And we can bridge that gap by going old school, back to basics, you know. But anywho, Mrs. Ainsley Ellis. That's the next one in line, right? Yep, that's the next one in line. Anna Crawford, Ainsley Ellis. It says, and hers is short, I was born in Spotsylvania County, sometime in November 1847. I don't know the date, but I do know I am 89 years old because it was written in my family Bible. Back in the day, that was, and sometimes today, that was a legal document. And you can look this up. It was a legal document. This is why you see in your family Bibles, you will see birth, family, married, death. Because when it's written in the legal Bible, in your family Bible, that became legal documentation. Just to let you know. My people were owned by Master Alfred Holliday. He was a good man to us, but there were some masters who treated their slaves different from our masters. She didn't feel like saying much. Oop, my hold on. My thing is gonna go out. Just a second. Hold on. Sometimes I plug out the screen so it's not that bright. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so yeah, well, she didn't give us much. She gave us a few lines, but what she did say is that she does know because it was written in the old family Bible. And if we follow that train of thought, like I said, back then, and even today, it was held in high esteem if something was written in the Bible. And that's why you see often, like I said, those Bibles and the Bibles that have the space for you to write that. Just note to self. Tom Epps. I guess the thought is that you're not going to perjure, you know what I mean? You're not going to lie, writing in the Bible that tell you don't lie. So that may be the thought behind it. Tom Epps. No, sorry. Tom Epps is a man. Oh, Miss Octavia Featherstone. I'm a little bit kooky today. 1860. Susie R.C. Bird interviewed her February 12, 1937. It says, when the war ended, I was a little girl, tween 5 and 6 years old. I will be 78 years old my next birthday, she says. Yes, the Yankees come to Petersburg down a hill and camp on Farmer Street in front of our house. I used to go to the camp every day in the afternoon and get hardtacks, crackers like the common soda crackers that we eat now. But they were so hard and tough that the soldiers call them hardtack. On these hard crackers, they would spread butter and sprinkle brown sugar. So I was daily visitor at the camp, went to get the sweets. The soldiers come to our house anytime. I remember one come and asked me where my father was. I told him that the Yankee soldiers had killed him. Then he said, "Po little thing, you must be hungry." He wanted to feed me his supper. I got mad even for him to think I was hungry. I ain't never been hungry a day in my life. So this is the pride that this young girl between 5 and 6, she had to say, no, I wasn't hungry. You know, to you to the stereotype and just think I was hungry, that's an offense. She says, my great grandfather was a thorough Indian. And, you know, I got Indian in my family. You know, a lot of people like to say that, but some people did. It says, I ain't know nothing about him, only saw a picture of him. And then he was dressed like the Indians. Grandma was mixed blood, people say, Irish descent, but I don't know about the blood mixture. Grandma's name was Susan Malone. Like Sylvester Malone? No, his name is Sylvester Stallone. Okay, she lived with my mother till she died. Mother, you see, was her only child. Mother had 2 sets of children. I don't know the name of the first husband. I've never seen my daddy to know him, but he was a white man and fought in the war. My mother's name was Mary Tinsley, and her last husband's name was Henry Fox. No one of us was ever slaves. A white woman asked me several weeks ago, had I been a slave, and I told her no. So this conversation is going well into the 1900s. That's for her to say in 1937, a European woman asked her a few weeks ago if you ever been a slave. That for me is interesting to say what was in the air at that time. Then she asked me, how did we get along making a living? I got fretted and said, no, I ain't never been hungry in my life. Yes, I was a free Negro. Because as we read in other narratives, freed Negroes had problems procuring jobs. Sometimes they were hungry. Another narrative said he was free, but they were hungry, and they would actually try to get food from the slaves. So she's saying they weren't hungry. It says, my mother and grandmother worked for us 5 children. Mother's second husband bought us a home next door to Captain John Hill home. We sold that home and bought another in Pocahontas. settlement on the other side of Appomattox River. The church that mother and all of us belonged to was the Third Baptist Church. You heard a lot of talk of this church. Reverend John Jasper used to come over and preach. The white as well as colored would flock to hear him preach his famous text, "The sun don't move," or "the sun do move." A man by the name of Reverend Willis was the first to preach that after the war, as I can remember. The first school after the war was in 3rd Street. 1 second, please. All right. It says, I went there to school and was taught by the white northern woman. I forget her name. 4 or 5 teachers were sent there from the north to teach colored people. We had a room nearly full. I can recall any other scholars that went to the school with me. Guess I the only one now living. This school didn't last long for the public schools was open. At that time, the old and the young folks flocked to the public school trying to learn to read and write. I forget to tell you how and why we was free. You see, grandmother being an Indian, she came of the Indian tribe, which caused our freedom, because the state of the child follows who? The state of the child follows the mother. So she's saying because her mother and her grandmother was free and she was an Indian, then that made her mother free, and by extension that made her free. You know, Indians were never slaves, so the children was always free. That is according to the law. So she had a little bit of bragging rights right there. This is why I'm saying everybody, I know people ain't gonna like it, but everyone is not the same. And because we keep trying to say, you know, everybody get together, everybody, and they're looking like, even at this time, she's making a difference. She was never a slave. This was a bragging right. I've never been hungry. I've been born free. Even I was looking up, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I was researching some civil law in Rome, which is where a lot of America got their civil laws from. And in Roman civil law, a freeborn was on a higher level than somebody who was freed. It was a different status in society. And this is what I see represented in the way that she's speaking. I was born free. I was never a slave and then became free. You understand? And even though everybody was in the same little condition to the sense of what was against them and the system that they were in, there was differentiations amongst themselves, like I said before, or maybe on another video, where they were bragging about whether or not your slave owner was poor. The owner who owned someone, I think it's in 30 years in a slave. The person who belongs to the rich master bragged because I got flyer clothes than you are. And I'm like, how are you bragging on stuff that don't even belong to you? But anyway, we're looking at the dynamic. We're looking at how emotionally it's like somebody who works at a multi-million-dollar corporation. We still see it today. And then you ask them, where do you work? Oh, I work at Apple. You know, it's a sense of pride. You work there. It's just like, who do you work? Oh, you work for Mass John. It's a sense of pride. But then you say, where you work? At the Piggly Wiggly. The Piggly Wiggly. You see how people still have pride where they're associated to where they work, even though they weren't getting paid for work. They got, I guess, perks, you know, less beatings and more clothes or whatever the case may be. These perks made you feel better than your brother and sister. It still happens today. And for this reason, I think it's very interesting to continue to take a look at this. So I'm going to read one more narrative here. That was Mrs. Octavia Featherstone. That's who we just read. Well, go ahead. Sister Angel, I see you tuning in. Is there anything that you wanted to add with that? I could look at the screen now, so definitely. Mrs. Minnie Foltz, her name is 1860. Again, Susie Bird, she was busy. She interviewed her in March of 1937. She says, I was born the 25th of December, and I am 77 years old. My mother was a slave, and she belonged to Dick Belcher in Chesterfield County. Old Dick sold us again to Gillespie Graves. Remember now, 15 of mother children went with her, having the same master. 15. Talk about slave breeding. 15. She says 15 of her mother's children went with her, having the same master. Honey, I don't like to talk about them times because my mother did suffer misery. And as you can see, I highlighted that because she's like the third or fourth, or I don't know how many people who have said that they didn't like to talk about this. And so that would equal into not allowing the healing process to begin. It says, you know, there was an overseer who used to tie mother up in the barn with a rope around her arms up over her head while she stood on a block. Soon as they got her tired, this block was moved and her feet dangled, you know, couldn't touch the floor. So they were torturing her mother. It says, this old man now would start beating her naked till the blood run down back to her heels. I took a seed and seed the whelps and scars from my own self with these here 2 eyes. So she saw her mother chastised, beaten, and tortured. This whip, she said, was a whip like they used to use on horses. It was a piece of leather about as wide as my hand, from my little finger to my thumb. After they beat my mother, all they wanted, another overseer, Lord, Lord. She says, I hate white people. And the flood water is going to drown some more. So she's the first who, so far, who has expressed. One of them said they didn't want her to come in. She didn't really want to talk. But she's the first one who verbally expressed that she hates, as she's saying, because she would have seen this done to her mother. She says, the flood waters is going to drown some more. Well, honey, this man would bathe her in salt water. Don't you know them places was hurting? Mm-hmm. I asked mother what she done for them to beat and do her so. She said, nothing other than fuse to be wife to this man. Now, this is for, and once again, I wrote Angry Black Woman Syndrome before I really connected the dots on this thought process here of what we're reading from Mrs. Minnie Folks. And I definitely, for part 2, these are all of the pieces that I'm collecting. And so she's saying, ask her, what did she do for them to be torturing her like this? She refused to be used. She refused to be the bed wench of massa or the overseer or whoever. She refused to be humbled in that way. And that was her form of resisting the system. And because there would have been no recompense for them, there's nowhere you can go, there's nobody you can call on who's going to come to your aid. And so in resisting, they were trying to humble her through the whip. She says, and mother say, if he didn't treat her this way a dozen times, it wasn't near one. Mind you now, mother's master didn't know this was going on. You know, if slaves would tell, why them overseers would kill him. So there was an issue with the overseer and the master. And so she's saying that this division between the two, the master didn't know this was of the overseer's doing. So you just really, you know, between a rock and a hard place. She says, and they used to have meetings and sing and pray, and the old patty rollers would hear them. So to keep the sound from going out, slaves would put a grand big iron pot at the door. And you know, sometimes they would forget to put the old pot there, and the patty rollers would come and horsewhip every last one of them. Just because the poor souls was praying to God to free them from that awful bondage. And again, this has been told many, many times about turning down big pots at the door to catch the sound, they said. So she's also testifying to catch the sound. She says, ha, ha, ha. There was one old brother who studied for one day and told all the slaves how to get even with them. He told them to tie grapevines and other vines across the road. Then when the patty rollers come gallanting with their horses running so fast, you see, them vines would tangle up and cause the horses to stumble and fall. And lots of times would break their legs and their horses too. So the enslaved people were setting for these patty rollers, these patrollers, aka the police of the time. One interval, one old poor devil got tangled, and the horses kept carrying him. till he fell off the horse, and next day a sucker was found in the road where them vines was, wound round his neck so many times he just had choked him. They said, totally dead. Serve him right, because them old white folks treated us so mean. Hold on for me 1 second, please. All right, sorry about that. She says, well, sometimes, the others keep going till they or they find where the meeting was going on. They would come in and start whipping and beating the slaves unmerciful. And this was done to keep you from serving God. And do you know some of them devils was mean and sinful enough to say, if I catch you here again serving God, I'll beat you. You haven't time to serve God. We brought you here to serve us. That one had me, when I first read that, it sounded like Egypt repeated. When Moses said, the Most High sent me, let my people go that they may serve me. And that was the very speech. Oh, you want to serve God? You got idle time. You know what? Don't give them no bricks. Let them go make it themselves. Don't bring no straw to make no bricks. Let them go out there and make it. This is the same verbiage, because the ego has the same program. This is the same verbiage that Pharaoh said. So how many years later? I'm going to read it again. Like I said, when I first read that, I was calling everybody. And I'm like, can you believe this is what the dude said? She says, them old devils was mean and sinful enough to say, because they would find them in these prayer meetings and beat them, these patty rollers. Say, if I catch you here again serving God, I'll beat you. You haven't time to serve God. We brought you here to serve us. That is the mentality. And that is very, 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 I don't know about anybody else, but I found that deep. But let's keep going. God gonna ride them wicked masters. It ain't what gets hit. It's gonna fall on their children. So she's pronouncing that on their children and their children's children, this wickedness is gonna be returned. It says, in them days, child meetings was carried on just like we do today, somewhatly. Only difference is the slaves that know the most about the Bible would tell and explain what God told them in a vision. You know, you young folks say a dream, that this freedom will come to pass. And then they pray for the vision to come to pass. And that's when the patty rollers would whip them again. She says, Lordy, Lordy, phew, 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 baby. I just know I could, if I knowed how to write and I had a little learning, I could put off a book on this here situation. Now she's saying, you heard what she said? If she knew how to write, but then she said, is it her who said they sent her to school? Or was it me? Oh, that was the other one? No, she didn't say they sent her to school. That was the one before that we met, Miss Fairweather or Featherstone. So she said if she knew how to read and write, if she was literate, she says, she says, I could put off a book on this here situation. You know what how many people have said, you know, I can write a book, you know, from my life experience. And that's also something that I wanted to put together to show people how simply from beginning to end, you can conceptualize your story, because again, we're reading people's story and someone took the initiative and someone could definitely benefit in the future, to conceptualize, to plan it out, to do your, thing. And it's so doable in this day and time. So definitely, among my other 50 million projects, it can't be right now, but again, it's doable. She says, you know what I mean about these way back questions you was asking me to tell you about, as for I can recollect in my mind. When Graves bought us, he sold 3 of us and 3 slaves. My brother and sister went down south. mother seed to the cotton country, and 2, she say they was made to walk in the cotton fields by their new master out in them white fields in the brawling sun from the time it break day till you couldn't see at night. And yes, indeedy. And if God isn't my righteous judge, they was given not half to eat, no nothing to eat, not enough to eat. They was beaten if they asked for any more. So again, they were afraid to be sold down to this deep country that all of the Europeans in the second wave of or the second exodus from the eastern seaboard to the deep south, the Mississippis and the Louisianas and the Georgias. People didn't want to go back there because they knew that you go down in them places, you ain't coming back. And that's when the cotton boom, and they were, doing their thing and getting really rich off of cotton. And so basically she's saying that her family members were sold down there. She said, as to marriage, when slave wanted to marry, why he wouldn't just ask his master to go over and ask the other master, could he take up onto himself this certain gal for a wife? Mind you now, that master called all the slaves out of the quarters, and he'll make them line up to see, stand in a row like soldiers. The slave man is with his master when this lining up is going on, as he pulls the gal to him he wants. The master make them both jump over a broomstick, and they is pronounced man and wife. I'm gonna leave that right there. Both stay with same masters. I mean, if John marries Sally, John stayed with old master and Sal with hers, but they had privileges, like married folks. If children was born, all of them, no matter how many, belong to the master where the woman stayed. I ain't even gonna go into that yet. Just stick up in, as they say in the Caribbean. It says, didn't tell her nothing about being free till way in May. Then her mistress, Miss Betsy Goldstein. Oh, sorry. I'm like, I picked up in the middle. If I ain't made a mistake, I think it was April when their war surrendered. Mother and all us turned loose in May. That old wench, old heifer. You could tell she was you could tell she was turned up. Miss Minnie Folks was turned up. She getting at them in her mind. You know what I mean? She called her a wench and a heifer. That old wench, old heifer, old child, it makes my blood boil when I think about it. She kept mother ignorant, didn't tell her nothing about being free till way in May. Another narrative we read, she didn't know for years. It says, then her mistress, Miss Betsy Goldstein, told her she was free, and she, mother, could cook her for her just the same, that she would give her something to eat and help clothe us children. That was if mother continued to stay with her and work. You see, we didn't have nothing and nowhere to go. So we all, just took and stayed till we were able, with God's help, to pull ourselves together. But my God, it wasn't against our will, but baby, couldn't help ourselves. So again, the narrative often is after they were free, there was nowhere to go, so they stayed on, some for food, clothing, and shelter, some for payment, and had to pay for their food, clothing, and shelter. My father's master told him he could farm one half for the other, and when time rolled around for them dividing crops, he took and give to him his part like any honest man would do. They were sharecropping. And Lord, child, them was terrible times too. So they was one step out of slavery. She said, oh, it makes me shudder when I think, some slaves had to stay in the woods and get long best way they could after freedom done been cleared. You see, slaves who had mean masters would rather to be there than where they lived. By and by, God opened a way, and they got with other slaves who had huts, you see, after they rendered no white folks could keep slaves. Do you know, even now, honey, that done been way back yonder, these old white folks thinks us poor colored people is made to work and slave for them? Look, they ain't give you no wages worth nothing. Gal cook all week for $2 and $3. How can you live off it? How can you? Can you? So she's complaining at this point that even after freedom, 50, 60 something years later, It's the stack is still stacked against you, or the deck is still stacked against you, so to say. Yes, pride in captivity. There was, depending on your thought processes, it's again, it's just a whole lot. It's just so much, and this is the latter part of slavery. This is she's coming on the tail end. But those who were entrenched when you were in the 1700s, and you have the 1800s ahead of you, and you have the 1600s behind you, right in the depths of this thing. It's really depends on where you came in this captivity and how deep it goes. If you just give me 1 minute, I'm going to check on these little ones, and I'll be right back as Miss Minnie Folks is turned up on these Europeans. She's saying that you couldn't care for yourself. You couldn't survive on what you was given. So give me 1 second. All right. Always multitasking. Always multitasking. My father waited on soldiers, and after the surrender, they carried him and his brother as far as Washington, D.C. I think we all used to say then Washington City. Ain't you done heard folks talk about that city? 'Tis a great big city. There's where the president of this here country stay. And in back days, it was known as dividing line for the North and the South. So she's saying DC was the difference between Southern and Northern. I done hear them white folks tell all about them things this line. As I was telling you, his brother was kept, but they sent father back home. Uncle Spencer was left in Prince William County. All of his children are still there. I don't know the name of the Yankee who carried him off. She said, Lord, Lord, honey, them times too over sad. Because Yankees took lots of slaves away. No, and they made homes. And a whole heap of families lost sight of each other. I know of a case where after it was 10 years, a brother and sister lived side by side and didn't know they was blood kin. And this is also something to keep in mind. The way that the families were ripped apart, like she's saying, the family ties were broken down. You don't know who is who. Your mother was sent down and you're here and your brother's over there. And I read of one story where a woman met a son. No, she didn't meet a son. She met a man and she married him. And when time passed, she saw a scar. Her son was sold away, and she saw a scar on the man that she married, and it ended up being her son. They had stories of relatives, close relatives, brothers and sisters who were sewn off. And because of this unknown kindred spirit or this attraction, and you think it's one thing and it's really another, it's really your close relative, your son, your daughter. I thought that was really wild. If I come across that story again, I'll definitely share. But here we're seeing, she says that they were living side by side and they did not know that they were related. My view, and I also after the war, that's why they said the Freedmen's Bureau played a great part in. They said that the enslaved who were no longer enslaved were up and down the roadways looking for their relatives. And we saw that in another narrative when the father came back for his daughter. They were going back to find the loved ones that were sold off wherever they could. So that's very, very. Whew. It says now just let me tell you how I did. No. Let me go back. My views about the children in them days is that these here children, what is now coming up, is too pissing brazen for me. So here goes another past enslaved individual saying that the children now are pissing brazen, she said. Now, just let me tell you how I did. I married when I was 14 years old. So help me, she says, G-O-D. I didn't know what marriage meant. I had an idea when you loved a man, you and he could be married, and his wife had to cook, clean up, wash, iron for him was all. I slept in bed, but on his side, and I on mine for 3 months. And this ain't no lie. Miss Sue, he never got close to me, cause Mama had said, she's funny. Don't let nobody bother your principal, because that was all you had. So her mother taught her, don't let anybody violate you. So she didn't know, they didn't prep her. She was a little girl, 14 years old. They didn't prep her that was part of marriage. So she said for 3 months, they're sleeping on separate sides. She says, I obeyed my mama and told him so. And I said to go and ask mama. And if she said he could get close to me, it was all right. And he and I went together to see and ask mama. Then mama said, come here, children. And she began telling me to please my husband. And that was duty as a wife, that he had married a perfect lady. This here children don't think of their principles. So she's saying these children these days are not thinking of that. But then again, it was your mother who taught you. So unless the mothers are not teaching them, how would it, it's all interconnected. One moment, please.
Call from.
Let 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. So they're blaming it on the children. This is what in the world? They're blaming it on the children is what I found interesting, when in actuality, she's giving the credit to the mother for teaching her. But anyway, they run perfectly wild, old women too. They ain't all them true to one, but have two. Just what is getting into this generation is the word coming to an end. She says the word coming to an end. Ha ha, I'm going to tell you something else. I had a young man to come to see me on one evening, and he said this to me. Miss Moore? He called her Miss Moore. Maybe that's because her name here is Folks. Minnie Folks. So he called her Miss Moore. This is interesting. Let me join my fence to your plantation. I give him this hat. I say, no, you go your way and I go mine. I was through with him. And mind you, I from that day to this ain't know what he was talking about and was ashamed to ask mama. But I thought he insulted me. I never did go to school, had to work, and am working now. And when it breaks good weather, I go fishing. And who works that big garden outdoor? Nobody but me. You know, I'm a mother of 11 children, and 7 living and 4 of them dead. So that was Miss Minnie Folks. She's kind of funny. She's kind of raw, She's telling you about how she feels. She still harbors these feelings of indifference and resentment towards the European for the oppressions. And we see this thought process today. She says it's hard to speak about. She saw her mother being abused because her mother stood up. So the lesson that you see her mother giving her in the back about not letting anybody bother your principal, as the mother said, this is what the mother stood by. This is why she was getting chastised. This is why she was getting beaten. And oftentimes it was the European who would call her now, she's the angry Black woman, because she would rather take the licks. She would rather take the stripes. She would rather, use her mouth. But she doesn't say her mother was mouthy. But in other instances, they would fight back with their verbiage. And this is where this stereotype. And so this is also just helping me to substantiate my studies into where this is rooted in, oftentimes, as it relates to the institution of slavery. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to pick up next time on Mrs. Julia Frazier. That was Miss Fanny, folks. I just dropped my bookmark here. Miss Julia Frazier. Let me see if we have any comments before we go. And we don't have any comments. Let me make sure and check. Not at this time. So I hope you enjoyed. I finally did the update for the Underground Part 2. If you missed it, like I said, the link is in the update box as well. And so I pray everybody have a blessed day. I have some more work to do and some more babies to take care of. So until next time, may we continue to grow each day at a time and begin to heal a little bit at a time. So go out and share this with someone. Share your findings with someone, share your books with someone, and maybe it can help them along their journey too. So until next time, my name is Amuna Yisrael. This has been the Lev Project by way of Solonomics 101.